All right, welcome to Now This is Podcasting. I'm your host, Connor, and I'm here with Dad by Day Gaming. So go check out his channel on YouTube. He's got some great gaming content, and we're going to continue part 2 of our review of Ready Player 2. And so sit back, relax, and please enjoy. So let's move on to, again, let's get into the meat of this book. The challenges. We talked a little bit about the shards, the new challenge that Halliday put out after he passed. So basically, the idea is that these 7 shards have been put out, the siren shards. The siren represents Kira, and it's kind of you're going through all these like little quests that are like things that would be important to Kira, and at the end of each one, Wade gets a vision of one of Kira's memories, and I think that's kind of conceptually again a cool idea. It kind of gives some mystery about like, oh, did he just create these? And you kind of unravel more that no, these are actual memories. Because he has that brain scan of Kira, and he's actually, he's, like we said, invaded her privacy and taken these like things that are precious to her and used them in a challenge, which again is just such a weird way to, in a sense, redeem yourself by removing someone's autonomy and like cogency over like what belongs to them, and to put it in your fun game for someone to solve. Like that, again, it's not a redemption story for Halliday. No. It makes him look even worse.
It's little bits and pieces of him being creepy over every single challenge.
So let's talk about the first challenge. It deals with like there's a calendar in Halliday's room.
Yeah.
And change the date or something.
They have to change the date, and the only way to do that was to find the calendar, put it on the wall, and then it changes the time period in that instance of that planet. And then they went back to Kira's house. They had to get a cassette tape from the basement first.
Holy fuck!
And then they put the cassette tape in the room in Kira's room.
And then they find a binder.
So that's later. That's how they get the shard, though, is putting the cassette from Ogg's basement into the cassette player in Kira's room.
Right.
There is a notebook when they go back and they're looking for help on how to get rid of Anorax. That they go back, and that's when they find her little like notebook with her actual like
her D&D campaign.
Her D&D campaign, and that's how they figure out that the Dork Slayer exists and stuff.
Yeah, again, just
super convoluted. There's no way. You throw as much money as you want at it. Nobody's gonna put those pieces together.
So that's the challenge that Lohengrin finds out about. She contacts Wade. Wade transfers her the money.
After he cyberstalks her and sneaks into her private group,
private chat
with her friends. Yes, absolutely.
And then it feels like later on in the book, when these other challenges come up, because there's 7 of them,
I guess.
Wade says he's like, there's a part where he has like this internal dialogue where he's like, I have to do this on my own. I will not ask for help. I must do this. And I was like, at this point, a huge amount of the population is held hostage.
Yeah.
And you think the threat is they will all be killed.
Yeah.
You should go out of your way to give all your money away to get help to solve this problem. Instead, he won't even contact Lohengrin, who seems to be a character that he trusts.
Yeah.
And he won't even contact her and her like low 5 group.
Well, and then like
so contradictory to me.
I think the reason why he doesn't ask a lot of people for help is because he doesn't want to incite mass hysteria, right? Like, because there absolutely could have been one group that they invite who comes over who's just in it for the views or something like that, because streaming is still a big thing. And they catch some bit about people being held hostage or whatever, and now mass hysteria is ensued. But absolutely asking like Lohengrin, her other 4 friends, because he trusts them.
Well, and he should know enough
to come and help is a thing.
I suppose you're right. Like
he doesn't know anybody, he doesn't know anybody, but like Sam does. But
H does. Like
H is still like one of the best PvPers in the entire Oasis. You're telling me that she couldn't have found like 5 of her closest homies to come and help do this stuff. I play Warzone with it. I can probably name on 1 or 2 hands of like people that I trust that way that I play Warzone with. You're telling me that H doesn't know anybody like that?
And like I think you could use the Gunter community as a resource too. So maybe not everyone like putting it on blast like that, but there's a resource.
But there are stakes in this one. They believe that there are stakes in this one that there were not in the first one, which is why they wanted to keep their solo-ness going. There's no reason for that mentality in this situation.
No,
aside from not inciting mass hysteria.
It is really weird how this whole challenge is put together. But they solved the first one. Let's move on to the second challenge, which is Sega Princess, which This is Shoto's time to shine. He knows everything about this really obscure.
It's a video game that came out in Japan, but then when it came over to America, people didn't think that teenage boys, were going to play a game with the princess in the title or something like that, where you play as a girl, and so that was changed to like Sega Ninja or something like that.
And you play like a dude.
And you
ninja.
play as a dude, and that's it. So it turns out that like Shoto's an expert at it, but it doesn't matter because Wade still has to play it.
Yeah,
and again, it's just playing another cabinet arcade game in some stupid pizza joint, and it's like, you've done that not once but twice in the first book. Why on earth are you having me experience the power of the Oasis and the freedom of the Oasis via an arcade cabinet?
Via a joystick and 2 buttons.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
But it's just boring. It's boring. It's a boring part of the book because it's and then I threw 3 swords at this guy, and then there were ninjas with purple pants in this episode or in this level, and then I jumped on these rocks and I was down to my 1 life, and then I threw that last dagger. I got the final power up, and it's like, dude, that's not fun to read about.
I had a note. It just says, "Holy fuck, he's just describing every level."
Yeah,
like that's it.
Which is why it's such a wasted opportunity. When you have something like that, why didn't they have it to where they recreate those things and they actually perform those tasks themselves? And you could describe a whole lot more than just some purple pixel dudes jumping around on a screen, when it's like there could have been an actual fight. You know what I mean? Like, you could have had to like create some of these levels in the Oasis and have the people participating in them like actually doing it in a 3-dimensional space and not just with a joystick and 2 buttons.
That happens in the first book. Is it that Black Dragon game? It's like an updated version of it where Wade actually has to jump around and do things.
Yeah, I think so.
But again, it's like you don't do that in this challenge. He just plays the cabinet.
Just play the cabinet game. I don't get it.
This is like our first instance of a member of the High Five just having depth of knowledge on something that seems so obscure. All right, so we've finished up Sega Princess. They've completed that challenge. And then you move on to kind of a break in between their next challenge where they get with Faisal, who's like their lawyer, and they kind of they spend a lot of time coming up with like legal strategies on how they're going to like keep this quiet, or like how do they stop from being like sued later on once they've solved this issue. And it is way too much time spent on that, about like the legal logistics and how they're going to navigate this.
He's just a bureaucratic like busboy, like peddling around legal jargon to try to make it seem like there's some real world corporate stakes or consequences, and it doesn't make any sense. Like,
it takes so long and it's so uninteresting.
Well, and it doesn't make any sense either. Like, chronologically speaking, it doesn't make a bit of sense. So their decision is to lie to the public about the infirmware, about it not being a threat. There's a bug, blah, blah, blah. So the problem with this is a global system, right? The Oasis is something that everybody uses all over the planet. So when Anorak showed up an hour or so after the main characters of this story log on, he has everything locked down. So what about this person? What about the person on the other side of the planet who's been logged into the Oni net? Who's been logged into the Oasis, the Oni headset, for 11 hours or 11 hours and 59 minutes, and he locks it all down. But the company's position is to lie about it being just a bug. So you're telling me that when old boy in China has been logged in for 12 hours, his mom walks into the room, knows he's been on this thing for 12 hours, and tries to wake him up? What's going to happen? What's the first thing that's going to happen? She's going to freak out because he's past the 12 hours, which she's going to believe is going to melt his brain through his ears. You know what I mean? Or she can't wake him up. Those things are made out of like titanium. You can't take them off. So it's not like she can do anything. She's going to call the company. Every single person who reaches this 12-hour mark while they're just at the beginning of their 12 hours is going to come to this same problem. There's no way that they're going to be able to lie about it. There's no way. You're going to have billions of people calling. My son, my husband, my daughter, my grandma is past their 12 hours, but it's not logging them out. I can't get this thing off their head. Please help me.
There would be huge swaths of the planet that have hit their time kind of simultaneously, and every
hour by the hour,
a different
time
longitude
zone
would hit.
Every time zone is going to end up getting hit by this exact problem. There's no way you're going to be able to keep this quiet. Why would you lie about it?
Yeah. It's weird. Yeah, it's just weird.
Thinking of it chronologically, they never address that whole thing. They make it that he makes it sound like everybody logged into the Oasis at the same time.
And they all have 12 hours left.
And they all have 12
roughly,
hours
yeah.
left. And that doesn't make any sense. The people on the other side of the planet do not have your same times. They don't have your same time limits because they've been on it all day.
Yeah. It's just to add a little, I don't know. It was weird to add like kind of legal drama to a book that should just be about your fun challenges.
It's stupid. It's dumb. It's dumb.
So let's move on to the John Hughes planet. That's like our next challenge. John Hughes, who did Ferris Bueller's Day Off and 16 Candles.
And the Breakfast Club.
Is it 16 Candles or 17 Candles?
16.
It's 16. You can tell I'm a big John Hughes buff.
Yeah.
I actually, that planet is kind of interesting to me. I don't, like I said, I don't like love all of his movies. I'm just not like super into 80s high school movies. But I do like the idea of like, it has all the different movies, but they all go to the same high school, and just like different parts of the high school look like the high schools from the movies.
Yeah.
I thought like, I like that idea. Like that's a fun
That
part.
was a good challenge. It was a good challenge. There was a bunch that went into it, and it's like, it's not so old to where people probably like where people don't know it. You know what I mean? Like,
it's not obscure. Like Ferris Bueller is not obscure.
No,
like
no.
we watched it a ton growing up.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in the 80s. I love Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So like a lot of those references felt like fun to me because I was actually aware of what was going on. It wasn't a reference to obscure 80s Spider-Man that only existed in Japan.
Yeah.
Which is like a reference in the first book.
Supaida Man.
Yeah. So I thought that world was fun, and I thought what would help make it fun is Sam is the character who has all like the knowledge about this, and she loves John Hughes movies.
And it just so happens that John Hughes was her mom's favorite director, so of course she knows everything about it. And like, that's just the problem with all of these. There's just some lame reason why this happens to be their area of expertise, and it's lame.
I won't deny that. It's just these challenges are a lot more fun to read about when it feels like the characters are also having fun.
Yeah.
And this section of the book felt like that to me.
Which I think in this part, she gets a little carried away because there is something that she could do or say at one point, and she intentionally does not do it just for the sake of building up like a punchline. And it's like, we're up against the clock here. If you have information about something that's going to happen or something we need to be doing, you need to be not wasting our time, because it's not just our time. There's 500 million people who are being held captive right now. You're wasting their time too by trying to set up this joke, and it's not even that good of a joke. So just carry on.
Cline definitely tries to inject like artificial drama into his book. Like this is totally unnecessary, and we're just leaving something out, like you said, for the sake of a punchline later.
It's not good.
Whereas I think practically these characters wouldn't be doing that. It's artificial drama, and it is frustrating to read about. But again, this was just a fun little challenge, fun little world.
Yeah.
I found out a really cool little Robert Downey Jr. fact I didn't know about. So that was kind of an interesting part of the book. I didn't hate it.
Okay, we're moving on to Halcydonia. So I misspoke in the last review we did of the first book. Halcydonia is the planet where the little kids go. Ludus is the planet with all the public schools on it that they had the first key on. So they're two different places. But Halcydonia is basically the planet that Kira and Og developed themselves to give kids like a place to go and play with animals. They like bought the rights to a whole bunch of TV shows like Pee-wee's Playhouse and The Big Comfy Couch.
I loved that reference.
Yeah, The Big Comfy Couch one.
That seems like kind of an obscure one, but I loved watching that as
I
a
know.
kid. So that was, and this must be how it feels like for everyone who grew up in the 80s.
Who grew up in the 80s, like, oh man, I totally remember that.
Oh, okay, maybe this book is kind of fun because
Yeah.
it finally mentioned something that I like.
Yeah.
So good on you, Ernest
Good on
Cline,
ya.
for mentioning Big Comfy Couch.
Yeah. So anyways, in Halcydonia, you can end up earning like a tree house. It's like basically your own space in the Oasis, and Wade talks about that as his first place that he ever really owned.
Like a getaway, you know?
And he used to go there with his mom a lot. So this is supposed to be like a location where he has this big, like gripping, I don't know, coming to terms with his mom's death sort of thing. Because there's a part when he's inside and he sees her backpack hung up on the rack next to his, and
I think he sees a picture of them.
yeah, there's a
together.
picture of him and everything. And like that was a pretty good. I thought that was a decent part to him, like dealing with it. And he comes off as kind of cryy, like a little too much crying sometimes.
A little bit.
But this was a good I think this was a decent, well, not good. I mean, I think it was a decent like execution of him showing emotions where they were supposed to be and who they were supposed to be directed towards.
Right.
And then it's a good time to allow Sam's heart to sort of soften towards him as well, because
I don't know if we've really got into that. They've broken up. They're not together.
Oh yeah,
at all.
no, yeah.
They
It's
really
supposed to
don't
be
like
this
each
really
other.
big deal that they dated for a week and then broke up, and then it's 3 years later and he's still all up on her, like still all hung up on her. It's supposed to be a really big thing. I think it's pathetic, but whatever. Anyway,
But I do like that section. I think Ernest Cline kind of reached his limit as far as adding depth to a character. But he did. He tried to give Wade some more depth, and I
it was
appreciate
nice.
that.
Yeah. So
The challenge is to like get all the badges because you did all the math.
The challenge on the shard is basically the shield, like the logo, the coat of arms for the Queen of Halcydonia. So he goes and addresses, the Queen and asks for help.
and kneels. Why is there so much kneeling in this book?
No. So he says that you have to kneel because if you look her in the eye, she'll send you on a mandatory math quest, and they can take up to an hour, and they don't have time for that.
But it's also like Lohengrin meets Wade,
Oh,
and she
yeah.
kneels. Like everyone's kneeling
To these people. Like
There's so
like
much
2 or
kneeling.
3 times they kneel like they're kings or gods, and they're like, my liege is like how they act on. And he's like, I nodded at her to rise, or I told her to rise. That's like, dude, that's weird, man.
so odd.
Why are you having these children bow to other children?
Well, and then it's also like other NPCs, like, oh, and then I bowed to so and so, and it's just
Well,
it's
but like
so odd.
you
Like,
interacting with an NPC one way will trigger them to do something one way, but me acting to you, I'm like never gonna bow to you. That's silly.
too much kneeling in this book.
Yeah, but anyway, so it turns out the Queen's like, oh yeah, I absolutely can help you with that. I just need to see your 50 badges of mathematical might or whatever they are, and it's another like unnecessary time for H to like blurt out a curse word, and and it's just annoying. Oh my god, like this is gonna take forever. And he's like, oh no, don't worry guys, I got these a long time ago with my mom. It's like, oh, how convenient that you happen to do all 50 of these right when we needed you to. That's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of this book. We're gonna harp on the same problem because that's.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about Halcydonia, or can we move on?
No, we can move on to now my favorite part of the book,
Okay, we're moving on now from Halcydonia to Connor's favorite part of the book.
which is sarcasm, because it's when we get to the Prince world, which is the longest read I've ever had in my life.
This world sucks.
This was a brutal section to get through, and it's not because I hate Prince. I don't know Prince very well. I've never cared for Prince's music, and it is more than okay to me that people are big fans of him, and I bet that this part hit home for a lot of big Prince fans.
If you're a Prince fan, you got off to this section, definitely.
But it is so indulgent, and it's like, oh, they brought up every reference they could, like, oh, you need the raspberry beret to drive the little Corvette, and it needs to be fueled with purple rain.
They go out of their way. They go out of their way to infuse this section with information, and like, I honestly like don't even know if it's to like make H's character a bigger deal than she needed to be, because it's like there is so much information, and they paint her like she's the only one on the planet that has this much information. Not even like one of the best experts on Prince, like the only expert on Prince, and it all just happens to be because her dad like left her a box with some videos and magazines or whatever, and it's like
records and stuff in
like
it,
come on. And
I talked about the John Hughes planet, and it feels fun because it feels like the characters are having fun. And so at this point, Sam has she's logged out to do her own thing to help with the Og rescue.
At this point, Sam leaves because she wants to go and help with the Og rescue. Like the whole time you're like listening or reading to this portion, you are expecting her to be going to actively rescue this man. So keep that in mind, because it doesn't happen.
Yeah, because at this point they've also found out that Og's being held captive by like droids that Anorak is controlling.
He figured out there's like a 3-part. He left like breadcrumbs and the other clues, and they were able to figure out that he was actually being held captive in Og's old house, which is down the road from Wade's current house.
Right. So we get to Prince World, and H is the expert on this. What makes this part so insufferable is that no one's having fun, and H is just like belittling everyone for not having the same amount of Prince knowledge that she does. And so for me, because like I said, I don't know a ton about John Hughes, but at least I enjoyed that part because the characters are having fun.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about Prince, but none of the characters are having fun. So I'm not having fun listening to it either.
It was literally like her dragging the other two around through one secret door and into another secret door, through a secret passage. Like, we get it, dude. It's all secret and you know it all. But it's just like dragging people around to go and gather items for this like big, massive battle. By the way, like they're about to go have this huge battle.
You know, when I think of Prince, I think of big bad guy to my video game.
Yeah,
which is what he is.
I think of the
in
seven.
this game.
I think of the 7-stage super boss at the end of Dark Souls, just floating around there with doves coming out of his ass and stuff. I don't like.
The idea to utilize Prince as like a final boss, and then for H to say like this is the hardest thing in the whole game. Like everyone dies. No one ever beats the 7 princes. Even people who are max level, no one ever wins. I was like, why would Halliday, of all the things he could pick to be the ultimate bad guy in his Oasis, why would he pick 7 princes? It's just so odd to utilize Prince in that way.
And it is still weird to me too how they talk about getting to level 99 like it's this big thing, but then it's still they talk about how you still can't do all of these things. It can kill a 99th level player in one hit, and it's like, I mean, is that to try to like incentivize you to go and play the game and do these storylines so you get an artifact that will help you, or is it like, what is the point of being level 99 in this story in the first place?
I don't think it means anything.
It doesn't mean anything, because if everything that you go up against will kill you in one hit, what difference does it make?
Right. We get to the final showdown with the 7 princes after we go through a really long, convoluted
item gathering quest.
Well, no, it's not even that. They have to go pick up
they go pick up
imitation band.
They go
something?
No, it's like, and I wanted to Google this before just because I had no idea who they were talking about, but it's like band members from other groups or like another band altogether,
like associated with Prince.
I don't know.
It felt so long, and I was so lost. I don't know. And they must be the most obscure bands ever. I have no idea who they are.
But then there's this huge like fight that happens between all of them. They're shooting sonic blasts out of guitars, and there's like microphone guns, and then they summon minions through this mirror, and it's like, it is just so much. After listening to so many like gathering steps, there's this big fight against so many players all over the place, and if you don't know, it makes it even worse if you don't know any of them.
Yeah,
because it's literally just like obscure name fought this obscure name, and this obscure name finally defeated this obscure name, and you're just like, I don't even know who's fighting right now.
Yeah, none of it means anything because I have no context for what's going on.
No, and again, I guess it's not necessarily his fault for writing that, but it definitely is like, you should have picked some material that was probably a little bit more popular to people who are going to read your book now in 2020, 40 years after this decade that this dude was most popular in.
Yeah. It's definitely a tough part to get through. The thing I think is most frustrating about it is there's a part where Shoto is starting to go through that what's it called?
Shoto is like 45 minutes away at this point from hitting his 12 hours.
His synaptic overload. And so he's starting to like act. I think the point is he's starting to like act weird, and
he's trying to make SOS become a real thing to the reader.
Right.
That this is like a real threat that they need to worry about, even though time-wise, when Wade addresses it, he's like almost an hour away from hitting his 12-hour mark. There's no reason why he should have shown symptoms. And the way that he shows symptoms, I think, is the strange thing too, because he comes up with this like perfectly laid out rhyme that disses Prince, and then hysterically laughs about it while the purple lightning bolt comes and kills him. It's like, synaptic overload is about your brain taking too much damage. Like
you're fried.
You're fried, but it doesn't say anything about how you're going to be able to magically have the ability to come up with this awesome rhyming diss against Prince. It's like, because you have all this knowledge. It's a contextual knowledge based on Prince diss on him, and it's like doesn't make any sense.
And it's clever, and it doesn't feel like someone whose brain is overloading would be able to come up with it. And so he gets struck by the lightning. He zeroes out his character as what we believe is dead now. And H's like reaction is to be like, I told him not to diss the great purple one or whatever. I was like, your best friend, someone that you've gone through so much with, is dead now. And it's just like, and that's why H is so insufferable. It's like, is to make a joke out of it. And that's another thing I think just Ernest Cline doesn't do well. He doesn't know how to like write deaths and then like the impact they have following it. They just kind of move on from it, you know? And that's the one tough part about his reads. Anyways, the H and Wade manage to defeat the 7 princes. They get whatever the next shard is, and we can finally move on from the hardest part of this book to maybe kind of one of the more fun things. The one part I really liked is we get to Arta 1. It's just really cool. I love that fantasy world, so to kind of bring it in is really neat. Unfortunately, H is still with Wade during this part, and she says She says one of the worst things ever, I think. She's like, "Oh, we have to go to Arda where it has all the white men and all the white hobbits and all the white elves and all the white dwarves and all the orcs are people of color." And I just want to say, like, kudos to Ernest Cline, because while it's saying this, it's Ernest Cline who wrote this, to pick one of the greatest authors of all time, to put his work into your own work, and then to simultaneously shit on it and criticize it for being racist while you still can't come up with anything original yourself, is kind of amazing. Like, the balls on Ernest Cline to say something like this about Tolkien is kind of incredible to me. And I really hate that that's how we're introduced to Arda and this like really rich story that goes on there and like all this amazing writing that Tolkien's done. But it's baffling to me that that's how you think that's the way to introduce this.
No, and it like further proves how shallow of a character H is, right? Because she spent the first whole book playing as a white dude character, right? Like, and I don't believe that the way that you look in the Oasis has anything to do with the way that your character performs. You're a bunch of ones and zeros. Like, you have white dudes playing as black girls and vice versa. Like, this whole idea of saying that there's kind of like this whole like white privilege thing in the Oasis is absurd to me, because you can be whatever you want to be and it's going to function based on your character, not based on the way that it looks. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me how you're going to like open up this whole idea of being who you want to be and then still making it about like race. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think you have a really cool opportunity with this book, especially by introducing the O&I, which is essentially just a big exercise in empathy. It's like you can live the life of a minority or someone who is a different gender than you or someone who has a different sexual orientation than you. So the idea that like this amazing tool exists in the Oasis and people have access to these memories and these feelings that other people
and
have
Wade
gone
even
through.
talks about it being like this great equalizer. Like, he's like, sex and sexual orientation is not really a thing anymore because you can experience it as either one or the other. Like, it talks about them adding a gender zero just because who you have sex with just doesn't seem to matter anymore because of the O&I. So yeah, you have this machine for empathy, but then you're still having your characters pedal around this racist nonsense, and it just is why?
It felt like a good opportunity to like explore the idea of like, you know, maybe we are kind of past that. Maybe we have like learned, and we are actually using this tool for empathy to gain empathy, and then to still have that kind of like rear up and still be brought up. I was like, man, well, then it feels like we haven't really turned the corner. It feels like maybe the O&I didn't do what you thought it was going to do. It really isn't as helpful as you think, which kind of diminishes its introduction in general. If it's not really functioning the way that we're kind of told early on it does function.
Yeah.
If people are still, you know, no one's learned anything yet. And that was a frustrating part of this part of the book, for that to still be being brought up. And I was like, man, well, it felt like you built something in that could have like been a good lesson learning for people, you know?
Yeah. That was a good idea that you had yourself to make these characters say for you, and then you crapped all over it by making H talk about how racist white people are, and it sucked.
Especially Tolkien. Like, come on, man.
Well, and then
mega pacifist who's never done anything wrong.
So we can move, like, something else that H does in here, which is particularly annoying, I think, is yelling at Wade because he doesn't have all the answers when it comes to how to figure out this challenge in particular. Like, she catches a glimpse of him with a search window open or something like that, and she's like, "You don't know what we're doing." And it's like, okay, slow down for a second here. And yes, in every other challenge, I've had the experts in all of these areas conveniently. Like, I'm allowed to not have a 95% solution of this challenge we're about to like come into contact with. I'm sorry, this isn't a world that I know everything about, like you knew about the Prince world. Like, that was a pretty cut and dry one where we knew exactly what we needed to do because you were the genius. Or the movie world, whatever it was. What's his name? John
Hughes, yeah.
The John Hughes one. Like, everyone knew exactly what they needed to do when they got there because they were the experts. And it's like, that might not just be this way. And
I kind of like the idea of there not being immediately the expert, because it added more stakes. It
added stakes. It added tension. They had to get there and figure out what they needed to do, and then that was going to present a problem, and they were going to have to use their combined knowledge and skills. Their combined knowledge, not the knowledge that H had, not the knowledge that Samantha had because Wade didn't have it. It was the combined knowledge of all of them together was what would have gotten them through that challenge. But instead, this just ends up being another one where somebody puts a leash around Wade and drags him around like a little puppy dog.
Yeah, so we can move on. H dies later on in this world.
Woo!
And Samantha shows back up, and it turns out, again, this is part of my problem with her character, is that everyone's just in the service of Wade. So turns out she is a big expert on Tolkien, and she knows everything about the Silmarillion, and she knows how to solve this quest as well. She pops in, they get through it, but what I think that this section of the book, the way it really functions narratively, is to really tie in like all these hints we've had at the feelings that Samantha is starting to have again for Wade. And I think Wade kind of gaining some empathy and not being such a big recluse creep. I think more of that stuff has been like, it's been hinted at.
It's been building up
to
this point.
And so this section really only, it exists to show that they care about each other
It's
again.
the catalyst for getting them back together is essentially all it is.
Right. And so it's fine, and it's just fun because I love Middle-earth, and I just think it's neat in that way. It was nice when H was gone, and we could have like, it just felt like there was so much noise when she's in the book.
Yeah, and it's like, I think the thing that's like really nails on the chalkboard when it comes to H is just the unnecessary like cursing, just to like, maybe it's his way of trying to like make her more edgy, and
I guess.
I don't know, but it's stupid. It doesn't make, the use of those words does not make her explain her point any better.
Yeah, and again, this falls into a lot of the same problem I had with the first book, is I don't understand who this is written for, because it feels like it's written at the level like a child would understand.
But the language isn't
but then you have
appropriate.
Yeah, then you have H, throwing around F-bombs all the time. And, we're not ones to shy away on this podcast, but I also have never put out that it has never been in a format that I think a kid would just like log on and be able to be.
But like, you cussing doesn't further your, like, it doesn't further like clarify your point to whoever's listening to this right now. It's just part of your vernacular, like, to some degree, but it's like, it's just too much with her and it's annoying.
Yeah. So we've gotten out of Arda. This kind of gets to what I hoped could have been a same sort of sequence as when Wade escapes IOI. It's something that takes place outside of the Oasis. And this is where they're going to kind of commence that rescue on Og. They're going to go to his mansion and break him out. And this felt like it could have been a cool thing, but a lot of it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, Sam insists on being like on location to be there. You at that point, like, you're a liability in a kind of like in a tactical sense. Like,
she's not a SWAT team member. She's operating a medical drone. She's not a doctor. Like, why is she there?
And I'm not going to like bring this up like you and I are some kind of big experts. We're both in the military. Like, I got out, you're still in. I know enough about tactical situations that you wouldn't put a civilian who has like no real value there.
No.
In a situation that now you need to look out for someone who hasn't given you a tactical advantage, they've given you a tactical disadvantage.
And to like touch back on a point I probably made 20 or 30 minutes ago at this point, she was supposed to be doing this the whole time she was absent from this whole from the whole like
the Prince
world. So what did she do the whole time? She just sat in that APC the whole Prince world just because they needed an excuse to get her away. So when H finally died, she could come and do the superhero landing and save Wade, and they could have their little moment together. It's like, she was supposed to be doing this whole time.
Yeah. It is weird that it felt like that could have been a part of the narrative that got wrapped up like kind of off screen. And then when Wade comes back, it's like, oh, cool, we finished that part.
There's no point for her to be there. There was no point for her to be gone. There was no point for her to be there. Like, if she had been with them on the Prince world, maybe Shoto wouldn't have died. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's no reason for it.
So we haven't really mentioned him yet, but Sorrento is in this book, and he's been broken out of prison by Anorak through like digital means. He's found a way to get him out, and the reason he needs to be out is because they need a human being physically there to control the drones that are guarding the house that they're holding Og in.
Which seems odd to me, that if you have the means to break into a maximum security prison and capture Og and hold everybody hostage, that you can't jailbreak a few drones.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I also think, why would you pick the most dangerous, unstable person to carry out this for you?
Yeah.
I just think that
Sorrento doesn't belong in this book at all. Like, it talks in there too about how he's been on death row for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't Google this, and I meant to, how long it normally takes for like the average death sentence to be carried out. I guarantee you it's less than 2 years.
No, it's long. There are people who've been on death row for like decades.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then I guess it's totally plausible. I was like, dude, this guy should be dead. Why is he, like, he's one of the most notorious criminals of his age, of his generation. Why is he still alive?
And the idea that Anorak, who has run the simulation millions of times,
this is the one version. Best version was the one where he teamed up and he had Sorrento as a sidekick. Apparently,
I think you could easily you could take someone from like low socioeconomic status and just be like, I'll give you $1 trillion billion to just sit here and press a button on a drone, and absolve you of the consequences because you have all this money, and I'll just send you off, and you can do your own thing.
Yeah.
There are, especially if it's this overpopulated world that has all this famine and poverty in it, you just get someone low
There are
socioeconomic
far
status.
more creative ways
Yeah.
to make this happen other than bringing an already defeated bad guy back in who just immediately dies.
Yeah, I didn't love it.
Immediately dies. He never does anything of any consequence.
No. So we know Sorrento's back. He's turned on Anorak, like, surprise, surprise. He's got a gun to Og, and he's like, you know what? Like, I'd rather kill him and, like, get my own revenge than, like, go on with this plan anymore. And Anorak has taken control of one of these drones that's in the house. And he says, is a self-appointed representative of the state of Ohio. He's like, I'm gonna carry out your death sentence. And he shoots Sorrento in the head, which causes Sorrento to then, like, pull the trigger and shoot Og. But when it's written, he says, you know, I'm self-appointed, whatever. I'm going to carry out your death sentence.
Yeah.
And then Wade says, and without warning, the drone pulled the trigger, and the bullet hit Sorrento. I was like, he literally just said the warning.
Yeah.
He said that he was going to carry out the death sentence.
And then I pulled the trigger. Yeah.
It was just so funny how, like, unaware he is of his writing style.
Yeah.
It was amazing to me. I was like, he gave the warning in the book.
Well, and then, like, that goes to, like, my particular problem with this is, again, they're sitting there saying stuff like, they say all the time in this book, well, haven't you ever watched a movie? That's not how it works in the movies. And then it happens exactly the way that it does in the movie. Well, what happens in most movies in this kind of a hostage situation when they shoot a person in the head? I would say more often than not, the person with the gun spasms and pulls the trigger, and that's not what anybody wants. So if Anorak is so Halliday or whatever, I mean, it's just another one of those things where he should have, like, shot at his hand or something, because
shoot the
in
gun,
the movies, when you shoot somebody in the head, they pull the trigger.
Yeah. No, the book is so self-aware, yet also unaware of what it's saying.
Completely
all the time.
oblivious.
Yeah.
Completely oblivious.
So Og's been shot. Sam, who has no background in the medical field or any medical knowledge, manages to
At
patch
least
him
no
up.
established.
Yeah.
At least no established experience is now administering battlefield, like, trauma.
Yeah, precise first aid
Yeah.
in, like, under a minute. They get Og out. They're going to save him and everything, but he's not in good shape. And that really just sets us up for the climax of this book. We've gotten the shards together. The last challenge is just to put all the shards together.
It's a hard one. It's a hard one.
And then Wade pulls a little fast one on Anorak. He gives him fake shards, which apparently have been planned this whole time.
So
we had no idea that was going on.
I think it mentions something, and, like, because they have two separate conversations back at the GSS headquarters, like, while they're doing this whole thing with Faisal. And it has to have happened during one of those things. He mentioned something about it, and it happens during one of those conversations.
It just felt like
I forgot about it. I completely forgot about it. And he's like, to my own specifications. I'm like, where the hell?
Like, where did this really precise thing come from?
Yeah, which kind of, like, leads to some other problems I have, but we don't have time for that.
But the fake shards allow Wade to take back the robes of Anorak, and so now he's put himself in the Castle Anorak that only he can access with those robes. And so he's safe from Anorak now. And basically, like, he makes a bet, a wager with Anorak that, you know, whoever they'll fight, you know, he needs to fight.
Well, before they even go after Og, he does that. Because he says, I'll push the button if you don't release Og.
Right.
So that even happens before. But then even still, like, after that, they're saying, like, I'll push the button. And he's like, no, sorry, like, I'm not going to release your friends. It's like, okay, well, then I'm going to die. And so is Og now, because he's got a bullet in his stomach. Like, and then you're not going to get what you want. Like
no one gets what they want.
Like, now Anorak has just lost all of his leverage, because now the only two people that can get him, he's running, like, Wade is running up on his 12 hours. He's starting to get migraines, which doesn't make any sense because he's got, like, 30 minutes left in his 12 hours. Og has been shot in the stomach. Like, Anorak has 0 cards left to play.
No leverage, yeah.
And he still won't play ball. Like, even though the success of his mission is determined by this person now who, like, Wade has all the power in this situation, and for some reason Anorak doesn't grasp that concept.
No, it's just, like, logically it's tough to get through, because if you built this up as the highest tier of AI who can essentially has been able to gain a ton of knowledge and do most anything, why has Anorak not put this together?
Well, and this is also the same point in time where Anorak is basically like, oh no, they're all safe. I was never going to hurt anybody to begin with. And it's just like his whole villain persona just starts falling to pieces. He becomes stupid. He's become no threat. And yet he still thinks that Wade's bluffing and won't do what he's saying he's going to do, which I don't think Wade would have either. But it's like Anorak just slowly loses every single bit of credibility. He loses every card he had in his hand to play. in the space of 15 minutes of book right here.
Right.
So then it kind of makes the whole fight that's about to happen means like so meaningless.
And it's so goofy how it's set up. He's like, okay, well, come on out of the Castle Anorak and we'll fight. And Wade's like, I never said I had to fight you.
Oh yeah, that is very much like heist, like Saturday morning cartoon hero shit to say.
Yeah. I actually thought it was gonna be Lohengrin that popped out. I was like, what a great way to introduce this character back. Maybe she does the fight. That'd be kind of cool. But it's not. It's Og in his own powerful robes. And we get what I think is supposed to be a really cool fight. It talks about how these are like gods and titans, and it feels like the most epic thing they've ever seen. And people show up and they start like putting it on their video feeds and stuff. But I don't understand the power level of anyone in this book or this series.
Right.
So saying that he shot lightning and it was deflected or there were massive explosions, like I don't understand what any of that means because I don't have the context for what any of that means.
And if you think about it too, like Og has to have some item that's comparable to the robes of Anorak, right? Which would have made him invulnerable and invincible and all powerful or whatever.
Yeah.
Anorak doesn't have those anymore. There was no way that he was ever going to lose. There's no way that Og was ever going to lose. He has to have some kind of similar item that Halliday programmed for Anorak that gave him every ability, every like all power. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like whatever Anorak has, Og has something comparable.
And at least in this scale, when we're talking about those items specifically, it's like an adult fighting a little child at this point. Like, there's no way the child can win. He doesn't have his invincible robes anymore. Wade has them.
Yeah.
Og has to have something like that. There's no way that Og can lose unless Og dies in real life.
Yeah. And Og also has the Dork Slayer, doesn't he?
He also does have the Dork Slayer, which was Lohengrin's whole purpose in showing up and dropping it and then getting hit with a spell and turning into like black smoke.
Yeah. Which this is supposed to be a weapon that is coded specifically to kill Anorak. Like that's it. That's the only reason it exists.
That feels like an odd amount of foresight to believe that this thing was going to ever do anything that would have put people's lives in jeopardy, and you had to code something specifically for this eventuality. I feel like that's an odd thing to...
Yeah, Og was like, just in case your NPC gains sentience, I just need to have a weapon.
And it just so happens, like, yeah, I mean, he was already like old and sick at this point too. Like, it was about to be the end of the time where this item could have been used, and it ends up being used.
Yeah, so we get it. He kills him, right? He kills Anorak?
He cuts Anorak in half with the sword, yeah.
Okay, so we get to the conclusion. Og kills Anorak, and the day is saved. The shards are united.
The day that we had previously found out was never in any actual danger is saved. Yes.
Yeah, because everyone was just in a nice. They were just taking a
nap. Taking a nap,
yeah.
Man.
But then we get the shards put together, and that's your introduction to Kira, the digital version of Kira, which is so weird. I don't really understand what is happening. I just don't really get why this storyline exists if it's not just to be like, hey, men, stop being creepy to women. That's like why I feel like Kira exists in this book. That's kind of why I feel like this whole book exists.
Yeah, I mean, I think most normal people know to not be creepy to women. I don't know why you need to write a book about it and have an entire character in here just to make that point come across.
Yeah.
Seems like a little much.
And like we said, just a big convoluted contest that is supposed to be the redemption of Halliday, and it's not.
No, it's now Wade's responsibility on what he wants to do with it, and it has nothing to do with Halliday at all.
Yeah. We also find out that these brain scans that the ONI does, it saves essentially a digital file, a digital version of each person every time they log in to the Oasis. And because Og happened to put on one of the ONIs right before he died, his digital version is now uploaded, and he sees Kira, and they start making out. And it's just so funny. Like, these characters are supposed to be like kind of grown-ups and stuff.
Yeah.
But Wade and Sam are like, oh, and then they started kissing, and we turned away because we're 4.
Yeah.
It was so odd.
Yeah, I do remember feeling that way. I'm like, why, dude? Like, okay, why aren't you making out with Sam right now?
Right, yeah. So that all felt weird. But I think the end of this book brings up real questions about, like, okay, how do we treat artificial intelligence? How do we treat sentience? How do we treat autonomy? I think there are...
And copies of people's brains, because in this one, it seems like they play pretty fast and loose with, if you're a copy, are you going to, like, feel that you were scanned and then wake up in the Oasis? Right. Or you're just going to feel scanned, and now you're still in the same chair you were in, which means that you're not the copy that's going to live forever. Like,
yeah,
they didn't, like, I don't know. I think he played pretty fast and loose with some of that. We had some good conversations we were talking about the other day.
I just think that there's a lot of big questions that this book, it kind of teases at.
Yeah.
but it never actually
No.
tries to answer them in an intelligent way. It's just sort of like they get put on a ship at the end.
And when
they're like,
whatever happens.
yeah, they're like, well, I guess that's the problem for digital, Wade.
The end.
And so there's a lot of big questions about
Yeah.
like, that's a huge responsibility to decide. Essentially, you're the arbiter of a brand new kind of existence.
A race, essentially, of
Yeah.
like literally eternal beings.
And it doesn't really answer those questions. I don't even know that it's asking the questions. It's those concepts.
It's presenting problems
Yeah.
and concepts. Like the more you think about it, the more problems you think of, and that's like maybe that's probably the thing is he's trying to like incite an idea that is so volatile that you just keep asking your own questions until you've thought of something fun to think about for him.
All right, yeah. So like I think all these concepts are floating around in the book, but it's not really asking the questions. It's not really trying to answer them. It just brings up like what should realistically be big things.
Yeah.
And it's not really discussing them. One thing I would definitely recommend is a book by Ken Liu called The Hidden Girl and Other Stories. He does collections of short stories. One of his more popular collections is Paper Menagerie. He's an amazing short story writer, amazing science fiction writer, and a lot of his short stories deal with like the arrival of the first AI, like the true AI, like sentience, and it deals a lot with how do you choose to forgo your physical life and become a digital person, because essentially you're ending your life physically in these books to become a digital version, but like your true life, like your physical life is over now. A copy of you will live on, but you're no longer living. So there's short stories in there dealing about like a mother and a father, and their daughter wants to become digital, and they're like, yeah, but you'll be dead forever. Like you'll be dead to us forever, but a version of you will live on. And those books ask real questions, and they have like these big answers in them, or maybe not answers, but it's exploring that.
Yeah.
And this book just kind of puts them out there,
And then
it ends.
then the game over. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, great idea. Write about that.
Yeah, like really I almost would have rather him left it like on a cliffhanger or something like that with this whole thing, instead of him sending him off into the Vonnegut, off into space and stuff like that. And then Ready Player 3 could have started from here, but then it would basically be a completely different book. Like there's a trilogy I've read that's called like We Are Bob and We Are Legion, and it's basically the same kind of thing. Like
Right.
How do you go about exploring the galaxy when you're one dude, but you can make digital copies of yourself at that particular moment, and you can 3D print new ships to go and colonize, but like it's all just the same, like just copies of the same dude over periods of time, and how the copies branch out and really become different people, and they disagree with each other even though they're copies of the same dude just at different times, because the
Right.
moment you make a copy, that copy is now a different person. They have different experiences, and it branches out really well like that, and that it would essentially be that book, and I would rather read that book than Ready Player 3.
Our big recommendation is read a different book than this one. That's what we're really trying to get across here. Right,
10 out of 10 would recommend a different book.
All right, I think we're kind of wrapping this one up. I guess my final thought is, I don't know who this book is for. The references don't land unless you kind of lived in that era and you just like all the same things. I think thankfully there was a couple references that I actually got in this, so that made it a little bit better. But the story feels like it's written for a child, but then there's like gratuitous language in it, and it's too simple for like an adult, I think, to read it and really enjoy it. So I don't know who this book is for. What is your final thought on this?
Really, this book is just, if you think about this book and the problems it presents, there are just so many problems just littered around. Like if you think about it with a commonsensical brain, you're going to come up with questions like, I have a question. Why is GSS still making weapons when they know that war is a problem in the world? That's like if Tony Stark had come back from the cave in the first Iron Man and kept making weapons. Why does Wade all of a sudden love Aunt Alice in the second book when they couldn't stand each other in the first book?
Oh, you're so right.
There's so many questions that I ask myself every time I think about this book, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, that's a good closing thought. On a scale of 1 to 10, unnecessary H curses, where do you put this?
Oh, this is like a 1. Like I gave it a 4 originally. It's just, it was worse the second time. It was painful because I knew how bad it was going to be listening to it the second time.
Right. I'm right there with you. This is a 1. I didn't like this book. I didn't like the first book. I didn't like this book. I will not be. Ernest Cline has a book called Armada out, which is supposed to be his better book.
That is a good book. I've read that one. That's a good book.
Oh, okay, well, I don't think I want to give him any more money, so I think I'll draw the line.
I'll mail you the paperback.
All right. So with that, Kiefer, I just want to thank you for being a guest. Thanks for doing this this book review. I more of a book discussion. I want to do a little book club thing. So this is even though I didn't love the book, it was nice to have a discussion about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And remember, be good to yourself and be good to each other.
Ryan, thank you for listening to Now This Is Podcasting.